One day, a silent man arrives at your door in an outdated suit, threadbare and black, like a lost mourner or a Bible salesman who's been robbed. Penniless, he needs a place to stay. And you, magnanimous you, soon find this stranger reading in your chair, eating your cereal, drinking your tea, or standing in your clothes at the window, awash in afternoon's alien light. You tire of his constant company. Your floorboards creak with his shuffling footfalls, haunting dark rooms deep in the night. You lie awake in blackness, listening, cursing the charity or pride that opened up the door for him, and wonder how to explain yourself. He smells like durian and smoke, but it's mostly his presence, irksome, fogging the mind up like breath on a mirror. You practice cruelty in a mirror, then practice sympathetic faces. You ghoul. Your cunning can't deceive you. You're afraid to call your friends for help, knowing what they would say. It's just you two. You throw a fit when he sneaks water into the whiskey bottle, then make amends. You have no choice except to learn humility, to love this stranger as yourself, who won't love you or ever leave.
Wow. I don't have a lot to say about that because, as I said, I'm not a very good interpreter of poetry, but I'm definitely curious if this stranger is meant to be a sort of doppelganger or a sort of aspect of the person being addressed in the poem, aspect of that person, or if it actually is literally, another person.
Well, it sounds like you're a very good interpreter, Thomas. That question tells me that you have interpreted very well.
Oh, okay. Well, thanks.
But I would one of the things that I learned years after the book came out is one it is very difficult to write something that is completely other than anything that has ever been written, right? It's very different. So I was saying that poem, and this is maybe just a couple of years ago, years after the book came out, and somebody said, "Oh, it's like Bartleby the Scrivener." Melville's great story with
Totally. I just read that for the first time pretty recently.
Yeah, the man who would prefer not to do anything. And I thought, oh goodness, you're right. It is sort of Bartleby the Scrivener, and I love that story, but I certainly didn't have it in mind when I wrote it. But it's in that story in Bartleby, right? You remember our narrator. So that is a story of Wall Street. That's the subtitle, quite
Right.
explicitly. And this is in the days when John Jacob Astor Wall Street is becoming Wall Street, right? Astor
Right.
is making millions and millions. When people were making, $100 a year, he's making millions. But the lawyer, the unnamed lawyer, who's the narrator, at some point he says about Bartleby, and I don't have it. I should. I don't have the words exactly, but he says, at a certain right, we all feel for those who are sort of downtrodden. We want to help. But Bartleby, he keeps trying to help him. He's like, do you want to come home with me? Can I send you to relatives? Can I give you money? And Bartleby would prefer not to. And the narrator says, at a certain point, when you realize that you can't help, the empathy runs out and you start to feel bitter.
Totally.
And I think, there's something very profound in that, but it's also about Xenia, right? And the guest host relationship. You remember Bartleby is living in the narrator's law offices. The narrator, therefore, is a host, and Bartleby is a guest. And here's a guest that you can't help. and you can't get him to do what you want to do, and you can't get him away from you. There's just this imperfection that you have to live with. And I think that's sort of what I was getting at earlier when I was talking about the ideal vision that we have and seeing others as an impediment to that ideal.
Right.
That there's just this intractable, imperfect reality that is living in our office, and we can't get rid of it. And we can get bitter about it. We can, have him arrested, as the narrator does with Bartleby, and he dies in jail. But there's a responsibility, I would say, for Catholics to practice caritas and to love this imperfectness, to love this, to not to settle, right? Not to forget that it's imperfect, but to forgive the imperfection while striving to make it better, right? You keep trying to help, even if it's futile. You keep trying to help, but you also just have to love. You have to forgive, and you have to love. Because if you approach the world differently, I think it just lends itself to bitterness and being aggrieved all the time and angry all the time. And I think a deleterious way to be in the world. I think that forgiveness, which requires a great deal of humility and courage, if those are different things, it seems to me a way out of this cycle of just resentment and anger and unhappiness.